Yesterday, my phone wouldn't stop ringing. It's been almost an hour since I sat down to write this, and my hands are still shaking. I guess I should just start from the beginning. 2 months ago, my parents celebrated their 40th wedding anniversary. A big deal, right? They rented out this mid-tier restaurant near our hometown, not fancy, but nice enough that everyone wore something better than jeans. My mom, Betty, spent weeks obsessing over every little detail, wanting to make sure her church friends would be impressed. My dad, Walker, mostly just nodded and went along with it like he always does. Honestly, I almost didn't go. I seriously considered faking a stomach bug or some other excuse. Being the family disappointment gets exhausting, especially when everyone's gathered in one room, looking at you like you're a problem they can't quite solve. But I went. Because 40 years is 40 years. And underneath all the bullshit, I do love my parents. For context, I'm 35. I live in my parents' basement. I dropped out of med school 7 years ago after what my therapist calls a significant mental health episode. Translation, I completely broke down during finals and never went back. Now I work at a local hardware store while trying to figure my life out. Not exactly the American dream, but hey, I'm not on drugs or in jail, so there's that. My brother Henry, on the other hand, golden child, financial advisor with his own firm, huge house in the fancy part of town, picture-perfect wife Eliana, who has something like 50,000 Instagram followers for posting about their authentic family journey. Gag. 2 kids being raised like future Ivy Leaguers. The party started out fine. People mingled, passed, around those tiny appetizers that never fill you up. I stuck to the corner, nursing a beer, making small talk with a cousin, one of the only people who treats me like a human being. My mom kept giving me these glances from across the room. Half, I'm glad you came. Half, please don't ruin this. I'm used to those looks. After dinner, Dad got up and gave his speech. Standard stuff. Love, partnership, 40 beautiful years, yada yada. Mom teared up right on cue. People clapped. It was all very on script. Then Henry stood up. I'd like to say something too, he said, flashing that perfect smile. Probably worth more than my rent. Everyone turned toward him. Of course they did. He started in on a speech about family and values, and I zoned out until he looked straight at me. Let's raise a toast to Mom and Dad, he said, for their patience with their second son, the one who dropped out of med school and still lives in their basement at 35. The room exploded with laughter. Every single person. Someone even pointed at me like it was a damn comedy show. Mom tried to look disapproving, but she was clearly amused. Dad just stared down at his plate. My cousin whispered, "That's messed up," but didn't speak up louder. My face burned so hot I thought I might pass out. Under the table, my hands were shaking. I had to press them into my thighs just to keep control. Someone patted my shoulder like we were all in on the joke. I smiled, or tried to. The fakest, most forced smile of my life. Henry wrapped it up with some line about how family sticks together, through thick and thin. What a load. The rest of the night blurred by in flashes. I remember hiding in the bathroom for 20 minutes, scrolling Reddit just to escape. I remember one of Mom's friends asking if I had any prospects, with that pitiful look people give to sick puppies. I remember staring at Henry's polished shoes and wondering how bad it would be if I spilled my drink on them. I left alone while everyone else stayed for the after-party. In my car, I screamed. A full-throated, primal scream that probably scared someone in the parking lot. Then I cried. Ugly, messy crying. The kind I hadn't done since the day I walked. Out of med school. Snotty, shaking, punching the steering wheel crying. But here's the thing. This wasn't new. Henry's been doing this my whole life. When we were kids, he'd wait until friends were over to talk about how I wet the bed until I was 9. In high school, he'd bring up my college rejection letters in front of his buddies. When I got into med school, he joked that I'd probably kill my first patient. And my parents? They'd give me that same look they always do. The "we love you anyway" expression that really means, "we're disappointed, but we'll tolerate you." They never stood up for me. Not once. That night, I got home before everyone else and just lay on my bed staring at the basement ceiling. Let's be real, it's not an apartment. It's a finished basement with a bathroom. Later, I heard them all come home, laughing, talking like nothing had happened. Mom came downstairs to check on me, but I pretended to be asleep. And that night, everything inside me started to shift. Something had to change. Not one of those vague, "I'll show them someday" fantasies I used to cling to at 2 a.m. when the walls of my basement room felt like they were closing in. No, I needed something real. The very next morning was Sunday brunch, our sacred family tradition, enforced weekly by Mom. Usually I'd fake being sick or claim I was working, but that day, I showed up. I needed to see Henry's smug face in the daylight, needed to remind myself exactly why I was this angry. That's when I overheard something interesting. I was in the kitchen grabbing orange juice when I heard voices on the back deck. It was Henry and his business partner, Baylor. They didn't know I was there, and the window was cracked just enough for every word to come through. "The Johnson account is getting complicated," Baylor said. "The old man's daughter is asking questions about the allocation. She doesn't understand the paperwork." "Just reschedule the meeting," Henry replied. "Push it until after the Williams. Transfer clears. We'll have it covered by then. And if she brings her lawyer like she threatened, Jesus, Baylor. Do I have to think of everything? Tell her I'm taking a personal day. Family emergency. Whatever. We just need 2 more weeks." It didn't sound right, even with my limited knowledge. The way they were talking, moving client money to cover other accounts, that was sketchy. Like, illegal sketchy. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I quietly pulled out my phone and hit record. They talked for another 10 minutes. About assets, transfers, delays, and some creative accounting that made my skin crawl. By the time I rejoined the brunch table, I wasn't the same person who had walked into the kitchen. Henry looked up, with that same condescending smirk he wore at the anniversary party. "Look who decided to join the land of the living," he said. Everyone chuckled. I didn't. I just stared at him. And for the first time, I didn't feel embarrassed. I felt focused. After brunch, I did something I hadn't done in years. I went to the local coffee shop, opened my dusty old laptop, and started researching. Financial regulations, investment advisor ethics, SEC requirements. 7 hours and 6 overpriced lattes later, I had my answer. Henry wasn't just bending the rules, he was breaking them badly, and that wasn't all. I found Eliana's Instagram. Buried between their flawless family portraits and Kao's blessed captions were signs. Passive-aggressive posts about being seen and partners showing up. Comments from her friends like, "You're so strong." The kind of subtle SOS signals people send when their lives are crumbling, but they're too proud to admit it. Over the next week, I went deeper. My greatest weakness, being the ignored, invisible one, had become my superpower. No one questioned why the family failure spent all day online. No one noticed when I started watching Henry more closely. I discovered he'd been using money from elderly clients to fund his own investments, promising them unrealistic returns. Classic Ponzi-adjacent scheme. And as if that weren't enough, he was cheating on Eliana, with someone from his gym no less. I found the messages when I borrowed his tablet while he was swimming laps in our parents' pool. I could have blown it all up right then, sent the emails, called the clients, told Eliana, but that would have been too easy, too merciful. I didn't just want to stop Henry. I wanted him to feel what I felt that night at the party, exposed, humiliated, and completely alone. So I started planning, meticulously. I dusted off the analytical skills I once used to ace anatomy exams and built a timeline. Gathered every shred of evidence, created backups, mapped out vulnerabilities, prepped every step like I was studying for the biggest test of my life. And for once, being invisible worked in my favor. No one questioned me taking pictures of documents. Henry left on the kitchen counter. No one noticed me printing things late at night. No one cared why I suddenly seemed interested in investment news. It's been 2 months. 2 months of family dinners and Henry's little jabs about my career break. 2 months of smiling through it, knowing what's coming. 2 months since that anniversary toast. Burned into my memory. Tomorrow is the day. Henry is receiving an industry award. Big ceremony. Black tie. All his clients, colleagues, and family will be there. Eliana's already hyping it on her Instagram, like it's the Oscars. My parents are practically levitating with pride. Everything is ready. The emails are scheduled, the documents are organized, the whistleblower report is queued up. At the exact moment Henry walks onto that stage, the truth will land in the inboxes of his biggest clients, the Financial Oversight Board, and a few well-placed journalists. Tonight, as I finalize the last details, I keep hearing his voice in my head. Let's toast to Mom and Dad for their patience with their second son. Only this time, I'm smiling, because by this time tomorrow, Henry's perfect life is going to implode, publicly, spectacularly, and I'll be there, champagne in hand, watching the show. TLDR. My golden boy brother humiliated me at my parents' anniversary party. I found out he's stealing from his clients and cheating on his wife. Instead of exposing him immediately, I spent 2 months planning the perfect revenge. Tomorrow's the day. Updates to come. Update 1. First of all, holy shit. I did not expect my post to blow up the way it did. The comments, the DMs. Thank you for the support, the advice, and even the people warning me to be careful. A lot of you asked if I was actually going through with it. Well, the morning after I posted, I woke up to Mom knocking on my basement door. She'd made blueberry pancakes, my favorite, and asked if I was okay, said I seemed different lately. Translation. She was worried I was spiraling again like I did after med school. Perfect timing. I smiled. Played the part I've perfected. Slightly damaged, trying to get better. Told her I was feeling good, actually. Thinking about moving. Out. Maybe even applying for jobs. Her face lit up like Christmas morning. For a second, I felt guilty. Almost. Because here's the thing about being the family disappointment. People stop watching you closely. They check in from time to time, make sure you're not completely falling apart. But they don't pay attention to what you're actually doing. It's like being invisible in plain sight. And for the past 2 months, I've been using that. Invisibility, like a superpower. Week 1, after the anniversary disaster, I established a routine. Mornings at the public library using their computers. Shout out to the Redditor who warned about IP traces. Smart thinking. Afternoons at the hardware store where I've been working part-time. Evenings job hunting from the basement. To my family, it looked like I was finally trying to get my act together, trying to be functional. They bought it without question. It fit their image of me, the broken one, trying to rebuild. My first real move? Reaching out to Eliana. Trickier than expected. We've never been close. She's always treated me with that special kind of pity reserved for the loser brother-in-law, but I'd noticed something. Little comments at family. Dinners about the stress headaches she'd been having. Remember when I said I dropped out of med school? It wasn't because I was stupid. I dropped out because anxiety and depression took me out at the knees during finals. But I still remember a lot of what I learned, especially about stress, symptoms, treatments. One afternoon, I accidentally ran into her at Target. She was standing in the pharmacy aisle, staring at a wall of pain relievers. I casually mentioned something about how too much ibuprofen can actually make headaches worse over time, rebound effect, and suggested an alternative combination based on her symptoms. The way she looked at me, caught completely off guard by the medical lingo, was priceless. People forget I was actually good at the doctor stuff before everything fell apart. That one conversation turned into coffee, then into regular texts about her health. Within 2 weeks, I was her go-to medical advice hotline, and more. She started opening up about how exhausting it was to maintain the picture-perfect family brand on social media, how the kids were struggling, how Henry was working late more and more often. I played my part perfectly, sympathetic, supportive, and most importantly, harmless. After all, I was just the guy in the basement. Every conversation was a gold mine. I never recorded her. Didn't need to. I remembered everything. While that connection deepened, I was working another angle. Henry's business. This was harder. I couldn't exactly stroll into his office and start digging through files. But family gatherings became information hunts. I'd bring up topics that nudged Henry into bragging, asked questions about investment strategies, feigned interest in investing my non-existent savings. He couldn't resist explaining how smart he was. Then came my first real break. Dad had been complaining about email issues, so I offered to fix his computer. While I was at it, I set up email forwarding for anything coming from Henry. It all went to a throwaway account I created. Morally questionable? Maybe. But I wasn't changing anything, just watching. That's how I discovered something huge. Henry wasn't just mismanaging clients. He'd been taking money from our parents, not asking, not informing, quietly moving funds out of their retirement accounts, the ones he managed, using them to cover his business expenses, promising them generous returns that hadn't materialized. That was week 3. Then came the gold mine. Henry left his laptop at our parents' house after dinner one Sunday. Totally unsecured. Still logged into his email. I had 20 minutes, maybe less. My hands were shaking as I forwarded everything important to my burner account. Took screenshots of his calendar, his inbox, his sent messages. That's when I found Kylie. At first I thought she might be a client. Nope. The emails started off professional, but then they got personal, then sexual, cringy stuff. Explicit. Confirmed what I already suspected. Henry was cheating on Eliana with a colleague from work. Probably not the first time either, but the biggest revelation was buried in his meeting schedule. He'd been regularly meeting with 4 specific clients: the Wilsons, the Johnsons, the Parkers, and Mrs. Yamamoto, all elderly, all wealthy. Cross-referencing with other emails, I pieced it together. These were the accounts he was pulling money from to cover gaps in other accounts. Textbook Ponzi-adjacent scheme, exactly what I suspected. By month 2, I had enough to ruin him. Publicly. Permanently. But I wasn't done. I wanted to understand why. Why had Henry turned out this way? Why did he need to step on me to feel taller? Why did Mom and Dad let it happen? Let him mock me, undermine me, treat me like an afterthought. So I started probing. Not accusations, just small comments, little tests. I asked Mom if she thought Henry seemed stressed lately. Told Dad I'd overheard him arguing on the phone about money. Light touches to see how they'd respond. What I learned was equal parts surprising and heartbreakingly predictable. Mom confessed that when we were younger, Henry was always jealous of how easily school came to me. That before my breakdown, the teachers all said I was the one with real potential. Dad, a little more reluctantly, admitted Henry had racked up huge student loans. That early on he made some bad investments and barely recovered. That he was still trying to prove something. To them, to himself. They weren't exactly excusing what he'd done, but they were explaining why they looked the other way, because acknowledging Henry's cruelty would mean admitting their perfect son was just another fragile ego wrapped in designer suits. That conversation happened 2 weeks ago, and I haven't looked at my family the same way since. It left me feeling hollow but more determined than ever. Not just to expose Henry, but to force my parents to see what they've enabled all these years. The final phase took 3 careful preparations. First, I created 3 evidence packages. One for my parents, showing exactly how Henry had mismanaged their retirement funds, unauthorized transfers, falsified statements, the whole thing laid out in plain black and white. One for Eliana, with selected screenshots of Henry's affair. Nothing graphic, just enough to prove what was really going on behind her back. And one comprehensive file for Henry's business partners and key clients, documenting the pattern of financial manipulation and mismanagement. A neat, damning dossier. Second, I set up a fake job interview for myself, 2 hours away, scheduled for the exact same morning as Henry's big award ceremony. The perfect alibi. Mom was so excited about my opportunity, she didn't even question the timing. She practically packed my bag for me. Third, I had the hardest conversation of my life. Last night, I sat my parents down and told them what Henry had been doing. Not the whole plan, just enough. Enough for them to understand their golden son had stolen from them, used them. Mom cried. Dad got angry, then quiet. They didn't want to believe me. But the evidence was there, undeniable. I left them with a choice. They could confront Henry themselves before the ceremony, or I'd make sure everyone found out. No threats, no yelling, just calm facts. And then I walked away. For the first time in my adult life, they looked at me with something other than disappointment. This morning I woke up early, packed my bag, set up the timed emails, each evidence package queued to send at exactly 2 p.m., right when Henry would be on stage accepting his award. As I was heading out the door, I heard them arguing upstairs. Dad wanted to call Henry. Mom wanted to wait until after the ceremony. Neither of them had a clue just how big this was going to get. I left the house feeling strangely calm. Drove to a coffee shop in the next town. Ordered a large coffee. Opened my laptop. Then I waited. 2 p.m. My phone exploded. First, a text from Eliana. Just a row of question marks. Then calls. From my parents, from Henry. Again and again. I didn't answer. 2:15 p.m. Eliana went live on Instagram from the award ceremony. Her face was streaked with tears. She started talking about betrayal, lies, to her 50,000 followers. In the background, I saw Henry trying to grab her phone while people stared. 2:30 p.m. Henry's business partner, Baylor, called me. Funny, he's never called me in his life. Google alerts I'd set up for Henry's name started pinging. Someone at the ceremony was live tweeting the meltdown. I sat in that coffee shop, still as stone, watching it all unravel from a safe distance. Henry's perfect life was imploding, and all I had to do was show people the truth he'd worked so hard to hide. The strangest part? I didn't feel as good as I thought I would. There was satisfaction, sure, but also a heavy weight in my chest. Not regret, just reality. This didn't fix everything. It didn't erase years of being the family disappointment. Didn't patch the holes Henry drilled into my self-worth. Didn't magically make me whole. But it was a start. My phone kept buzzing. I figured I'd answer eventually. But for now, I just watched the notifications stack up and thought about Henry. Was he shaking like I was that night at the anniversary dinner? Was he smiling through clenched teeth while everyone stared? God, I hope so. Final update, for now. I didn't sleep at all last night. Just stared at my phone as notifications kept piling up like wreckage from a plane crash I'd been piloting. 37 missed calls, 62 texts, digital bodies in the aftermath. Around 3 a.m., I finally turned my phone off. Sat in the dark motel room I'd booked instead of going home, because I'm not that stupid, and just breathed. For the first time in years, maybe decades, there was this weird lightness in my chest. Not joy, not relief, just space. Room to exist. Room to feel like something other than broken. At 7 a.m., I turned my phone back on. 5 new voicemails from Henry, each one more frantic than the last. The final one was just breathing and crying. Part of me wanted to save it as a ringtone. The rest of me just felt empty. My parents had texted too, asking where I was, if I was safe, when I was coming home. Not a word about Henry or the fallout. Classic Betty and Walker. Ignore the elephant until it tramples someone through a wall. The most surprising message? Eliana. 3 words. We need to talk. No accusations, no anger. Just that. I skimmed some messages from people who were at the ceremony. Apparently, Henry lunged for Eliana's phone mid-live stream, knocked over a glass of water. Baylor had to physically restrain him while people stared in stunned silence. The inner circle is panicking now. Colleagues, clients, partners, all. Scrambling to understand what just happened. I showered, packed up, checked out of the motel, then sat in my car for 20 full minutes just thinking. I couldn't go home. Not yet. Eventually, I drove to the local diner where I used to study during med school. Ordered coffee and eggs. Tried to look like a normal person. Whose life wasn't imploding and exploding at the same time? That's when my phone rang again. Mom. I almost didn't answer. But something in me had changed. I wasn't hiding anymore. She was crying before I even said hello, babbling about how Henry had been arrested. Arrested? That wasn't part of my plan. Apparently, one of his elderly clients had immediately contacted the authorities after receiving the evidence package I sent. Turns out, Henry was already under investigation for financial irregularities. The police had just been waiting for solid proof, and I'd gift-wrapped it for them. Mom kept asking why. Why would I do this to the family? Was this really what I wanted? Not once did she ask why Henry did what he did. I let her talk herself out. Then I said simply, I'm coming home. We'll talk there. The drive back felt surreal. Like I was floating above my own body, watching someone else navigate traffic. I kept waiting for the regret, the guilt. But it didn't come. Just a strange calm, a quiet certainty that I had done what needed to be done. When I pulled into the driveway, Dad was waiting on the porch. He looked 10 years older than when I left, shoulders hunched, face gray. He didn't say a word, just opened the door and gestured for me to come in. Mom was at the kitchen table, surrounded by tissues, scrolling through messages from family friends who already knew what happened. News travels fast in a tight-knit community, even when it doesn't make headlines. The 3 of us sat in silence for what felt like hours. Finally, Dad spoke. He asked why I hadn't just come to them about Henry. Why the public humiliation? Why destroy everything in one day? I laughed. Actually laughed out loud. Do you remember the anniversary party? I asked. Do you remember doing nothing while Henry humiliated me in front of everyone we knew? Do you remember every family gathering where his jokes about my failures went unchallenged? Mom started crying again. Dad stared at his hands, and in that moment, I realized. They weren't angry because of what I'd done. They were angry because I'd forced them to see what they'd spent years ignoring. I was about to say more when the front door slammed open. Henry, his perfect hair was a mess, tie loose around his neck, eyes wild in a way I'd never seen before. He'd obviously been released on bail. He saw me and lunged, literally lunged across the room like some animal. Dad barely caught him before he reached me. He was screaming, "You ruined everything! You've always been jealous! You'll never amount to anything!" I didn't flinch. I didn't move. I just looked him dead in the eyes and said, Least I never stole from old people or cheated on my wife." He broke, collapsed against Dad, sobbing about how it wasn't supposed to be like this. How he just needed a little more time, how Kylie didn't mean anything, how he felt trapped by the perfect life everyone expected him to live. And in that moment, looking at him crumpled on our parents' kitchen floor, I had a strange realization. Henry was just as messed up as me, maybe even more. He'd just been better at hiding it. Mom tried to fix things, made us all sit down, made tea no one drank, tried to mediate like we were squabbling over toys, not the complete implosion of our entire family dynamic. It was so ridiculous I nearly laughed again. Henry still wouldn't look at me. He talked only to our parents, like I wasn't even in the room. He said he'd fix everything, get a good lawyer, make things right with Leliana, rebuild his business reputation. Dad finally stopped him. He just held up his hand and said, "Enough, Henry." It was the first time I'd ever heard him speak to the golden child without reverence. "You stole from us, from your clients, you lied to everyone." The silence after that was deafening. Then my phone buzzed, a text from Leliana. "I'm outside." I excused myself and stepped out to the porch. She was sitting in her ridiculous luxury SUV, sunglasses hiding what I assumed were puffy eyes. I got in. We sat in silence for a moment before she handed me her phone. On the screen was a months-old text exchange between her and Henry. She had confronted him about the affair. He'd gaslit her, made her feel crazy, paranoid, like she was the problem. She wasn't crying, she wasn't yelling, she was calm, eerily calm. "What else do you know?" she asked. "What else has Henry been hiding?" I told her everything, the money, the manipulation, all of it. By the end, she was nodding, like someone hearing a diagnosis they already knew was coming. Before I left the car, she thanked me for blowing up her marriage, said she'd been questioning her own perception for months, said the truth, however painful, was better than living a lie. When I went back inside, Henry was gone. Mom said he'd gone to talk to his lawyer. Dad was on the phone with their bank, trying to assess the damage to their retirement. I went downstairs and started packing. Not everything, just enough for a few days. I needed space to think, to breathe, to figure out what came next. As I zipped up my bag, Dad appeared at the bottom of the stairs. He looked lost, like a tired old man standing in the doorway to the room I'd occupied as an adult for far too long. "Where are you going?" he asked. "I don't know yet," I said. "Just not here." Then he did something I never expected. He apologized, not just for today, not just for the anniversary, for everything, for letting Henry get away with it for so long, for failing both of us in different ways, for being too blind or too proud to see the truth. It wasn't a movie moment. He didn't cry. He didn't hug me. He just said it, quietly, plainly. I nodded, not ready to forgive, but recognizing what it cost him to say it. That was yesterday. Today, I woke up in another motel room and checked my phone. The fallout continues. Henry's company released a statement saying he's been temporarily relieved of duties pending investigation. Leliana has filed for emergency custody of the kids. I've spent most of the day ignoring calls, thinking about what's next. The revenge is done. But I don't feel the victory I imagined. Instead, there's this strange emptiness, like I've been running a marathon for years and suddenly crossed a finish line I didn't even realize was coming. One thing is clear. I can't go back to the basement, can't go back to being the family disappointment. That version of me died the moment I decided to fight back. I just got off the phone with my cousin, the only family member who's ever treated me like a human being. He offered me his spare room while I figure things out. Said he was proud of me for standing up for myself, even if the method was nuclear level. Petty. Made me laugh for the first time in days. Henry texted me once today. "I hope you're happy now." I didn't respond. There's nothing left to say between us. Mom keeps texting links to family therapy options. Dad hasn't reached out again. The family group chat, the one that used to buzz with Henry's achievements and my conspicuous absence, is completely silent. I don't know what happens now. I don't know if this family can recover. I don't know if Henry will actually face consequences, or if money and privilege will save him once again. But I do know this. I'm not shaking anymore. My hands are steady as I type this. The basement dweller, the med school dropout, the family disappointment. He's gone. I'm someone else now, someone who fought back. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough for now.